Hello everyone, welcome to another Commander Deck Tech. Today we are looking at one of the new commanders that comes in Jumpstart 25. It was interesting to see a whole slew of new commanders, but one caught my eye as the one that brought the most unique commander of the bunch. So let's talk about Shroofus Sproutsire. Shroofus Sproutsire is a legendary creature, Saproling. It's a 1/1 that costs 2 and a green. It has Trample, and whenever a Saproling you control deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green Saproling creature tokens. Basically, this guy gives your Saprolings Saproling Link, and that's a quite powerful ability. Mono green, I have a love-hate relationship with. Sometimes it pops out gems like this. Most times the commander doesn't do enough for you to justify building in mono green, a color that does well with lands and big creatures but suffers when it comes to interaction and card draw. This is probably the first mono green commander that's caught my eye for simply being a really efficient token generator. It's a go wide strategy and I couldn't help but try to build it. Maybe one day I'll talk about my other favorite green commanders and why I hate all of the other ones, but anyway, let's get into Shroofus. First off, you can take this deck in two different ways, and I've kind of gone both of those ways. The first way is that I want the deck to be making an inconceivably large amount of Saprolings from multiple sources, so we're not putting all of our eggs in one basket with our commander. So we put in the best of the Saproling Generators in here. The second way is to utilize pumping abilities to make sure that Shroofus' ability has maximum effect, which we'll talk about in the next section. There are a bunch of Saproling Generators, so I'm going to go through them pretty quick. Brightcap Badger and Utopia Mycon both make Saprolings and turn them into ramp engines. Fungal Plots and Night Soil both take advantage of exiling cards in graveyards and a little bit of card draw. Fungal Rebirth is a regrowth effect, and it also makes some Saprolings if something died. Fungal Sprouting can really benefit from one of our pump spells, making one of our Saprolings massive, and then just making that many more of them. Mycoloth requires a bunch of Saprolings to get started, but then it provides twice fold on your upkeep. Similarly, Saproling Symbiosis will make a lot of Saprolings if we already have a bunch, and Spontaneous Generation will do the same if we have a large hand. Namada Grove Guardian is a cheap and repeatable way to get Saprolings out and to pump them. Psychotrope Thallid is another fungus that also draws you cards for super cheap. Scatter the Seeds and Sprout Storm are efficient spells that get us a bunch of Saprolings. Second Harvest and For the Common Good make copies of our tokens with a lot of extra benefit on the latter for protection and life gain. Spore Mound gives us Saprolings on lands entering, something that has special synergy with another card in the deck that we'll go over later. Spore Sower Thallid and Spore Loth Ancient power up all of our fungus generators. Tendershoot Dryad gives us a Saproling every upkeep, not just your own, and it pumps them up by 2. It's an all-star in the deck, and it absolutely needs to be in here. Thallid Germinator and Vitaspore Thallid are two good fungus generators with other helpful effects for combat. And then Vertaloth the Ancient can make us a bunch of Saprolings all at once, and then sticks around to pump them up. Now that we're through the Saproling Generators, we're loading up this deck with a whole bunch of pump effects, and there are almost as many of these as there are Saproling Generators. I'll note here that some of them are anthems, some of them put counters on creatures, so there's a variety of effects in here with different technical names, but they all accomplish the same thing of making our Saprolings bigger, so we do more damage, to make more Saprolings, so we can win the game faster. Archdruid's Charm is a great all-around card in the deck. The first mode can get us a win con, the second mode is a pump spell and a removal spell, and the third one is also removal. So it's a great card for most green decks because it fills a lot of these holds that being in mono green forces you to try to fill up. Banner of Kinship, it pumps all of our Saprolings quite a lot if we have a bunch already on the battlefield. I will mention that Coat of Arms is great in this deck, but I typically don't put it in decks due to the additional cognitive load of calculating how many other creatures of the same type there are on the battlefield for 4 players all at once. Banner of Kinship is a great new card from Foundations that has an awesome benefit that's similar, and it's just for you. So this will help you not be so overbearing at your table. Beastmaster Ascension is easy to satisfy, gives us +5/+5 to all of our creatures. It's a huge buff. Blackblade Reforged is easily one of the best things that we can attach to Shroofus or any of our Saprolings to make a massive creature out of nowhere. Bone Sabers gives us a bunch of counters on attack, which makes our commander a real menace. Forgotten Ancient goes crazy with a game where everyone is casting multiple spells a turn, and this only serves to make our commander even more massive. If Shroofus gives Saproling Link, Power Fist gives +1/+1 counter link, which makes more Saprolings and makes bigger Saprolings, which is great. Raised by Giants makes Shroofus a 10/10, which by my math is a lot of Saprolings. Renata, Called to the Hunt, and Ruxa, Patient Professor give all of our tokens a buff, and on their own they effectively double our board's power just by sticking around. Stoneforge Masterwork is another card like Banner of Kinship, but it just makes one creature really big, which in this case may be all we need. Sword of the Squeak is the same thing, it's going to gain a benefit from all of our 1/1 tokens. Sylvan Anthem is a cheap anthem that also gives us a ton of scry power when we have a wave of Saprolings enter, which is super cool and really helpful for finding our win cons. And then we have Vigor, which makes it so blocking makes our Saprolings that much worse. I'll also mention here that we have Kinkerbloom, Evolution Sage, and Karn's Bastion, since we have a lot of these cards that make +1/+1 counters, or fungus counters, or spore counters, and Proliferate will help us make the most use out of those cards. It's kind of a small sub-theme in the deck, so I don't put a lot of emphasis on it, but you could easily add a bunch more Proliferate cards here and go all in on that strategy. Alright. Let's get down to business. How do we win? Well, hopefully the pump spells and the overwhelming number of Saprolings is enough, but to really seal the deal, we have a couple of tricks up our sleeve. Life and Limb is an awesome card. It turns all of our Saprolings and all of our forests into Saprolings and forests. This means that landfalls trigger whenever a Saproling enters. We have 30 forests in the deck that are now Saprolings, and they all tap for mana now. It's not without some drawbacks, but it's such an explosive card for partnering with something like Concordant Crossroads that it will hopefully make us pull out a win on the turn it comes out. Orin Frostfang and Champion of Lamholt are great things to have on the board if you're swinging with a bunch of creatures and you don't want to get blocked. Death Touch is going to dissuade them, and Champion is not even going to let them because it's going to be huge because of the number of creatures that are entering. And if you want to overrun your opponents, Craterhoof Behemoth and Overwhelming Stampede are fantastic finishers. Craterhoof obviously will make our board undeniably massive, so massive that Overwhelming Stampede is probably actually just enough to get everything through. We definitely don't need the massive power that Craterhoof gives to the board, but that just means it's going to be that much easier to close out the game if we do get one of these two cards. Alright, so we've already touched on most of the deck, but we need to go through a couple more utility cards that make the deck great. Like I said, green struggles with consistency, so any amount of additional card draw, ramp, and interaction that you can give that aren't tied to the main theme of the deck will help bolster the deck. Idol of Oblivion is going to be very easy to tap every turn to get a draw. Skullclamp, I'm sure you know, is an all-star in a 1/1 token deck. It's going to be crazy cheap card draw, especially in this deck. If you're tapping those Saprolings for mana in any way, they can fuel that cost, which means they could just tap and sacrifice a Saproling, draw 2 cards. Season of Gathering does a lot of things, but the most useful of which is probably the card draw. It's also a board wipe and a pump spell, so it does a lot of what this deck needs. Shamanic Revelation is simply the best creature draw spell for this kind of go wide deck, netting us a ton of cards. Beast Within and Crescent Grip helps us with the hard to interact against permanents that our opponents are going to have. Eldrazi Monument makes our tokens indestructible and flying and pumps them. It's just one of the best go wide artifacts of all time. Heroic Intervention can help us save our entire board. Tyvar's Stand can help us save one of our creatures, but it can turn into a pump spell as well in kind of a neat combat trick. For ramp, we have Crap Rotation. That's going to help us find something like Reliquary Tower, Three Tree City, Yavimaya Cradle of Growth, or Orin Reef the Vastwood, depending on what kind of utility we're looking for in the moment. Usually, I'm looking for Three Tree City or Reliquary Tower. We have Cultivate, Skyshroud Claim, and 3 Visits. That helps us get more forests into play. And then we have Harvest Season, which could potentially get all of our forests into play if we swing with a whole bunch of Saprolings and then cast that. Circle of Dreams Druid produces so much mana that we're not going to know what to do with it. Emerald Medallion makes all of our green spells cheap, and then Jaheira, Friend of the Forest, is another way we have to turn all of our Saprolings into mana dorks. And that's it for Shroofus. It was really fun to put this together. I loved the simplicity of the deck. There were only 4 categories that we went over. The whole deck is so focused on the go wide strategy, and Shroofus makes it really easy for us to accelerate our game really quickly at the start. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech. Let me know what you think of this commander and the other commanders that you see from Jumpstart 25. I'd love to hear what you're building and how you're building this. So until next time, thank you for watching.